Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello, everybody. Wednesday night, 9 p.m. here in Ireland. Don't look like outside. It's kind of shiny and beautiful day, but it's 9 o'clock here. This is not a recorder video. That's the blessings of the summer, you know? Because by the way,
Midsummer's Day. Midsummer.
Yeah. Our solstice was yesterday. Tuesday, 2 days ago. Okay, so Fayute, my Irish friends, thank you for having you all here. Our friends from America, from Brazil, from Portugal, from UK, from Uruguay, and we will tell more along our discussion here today. And today we do have a special guest, and I would like to start with her. Our dear friend Siliva Gibbons from UK. I know her for many years. It's a pleasure to share this moment with her, and I really think we have so many things to learn from her and her knowledge. So Sylvia, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here, and I've come to learn. Because I've learned something, especially in Spiritism. The more you learn, the less you know. So you always have to go studying and learning. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Olá a todos, boa noite de Londres, bom dia e boa tarde para os que estão fora da Europa. Que Jesus possa abençoá-los a todos e é uma alegria muito grande novamente poder estar aqui. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone from the world. It's a great pleasure to be here once again. And I hope you can have a very nice 90 minutes or 60 minutes. And together we will achieve the aim to know a little bit more about psychological spirituality and spiritual attachment. So welcome everyone. May God bless with you all. Thank you.
Labas vakaras visiems. Šiandien mūsų tema bus apie psichologinės problemas ir dvasių prisirišimą. Labai svarbi tema, nes mes gydytojai turime paklausti pacientų apie jų dvasinį gyvenimą, ne tik rašyti vaistus. Tikiuosi, kad jums bus naudinga ir jums patiks labai, kad mes turime pakalbėti ir pamokti. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. Thank you Wanda, Maria, Eugenia, Leopold, Marisa, Elsa Lee, all of you that are here tonight with us. And hello to everybody who is joining us later and at any time. Thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy and participate with us tonight. Thank you.
Hello, bonjour, bonsoir à tous. Heureux d'être parmi vous ce soir pour parler de ce sujet assez pointu et passionnant, hein, qui est des problèmes psychologiques et des problèmes d'obsession qu'on va essayer de décortiquer un peu pour vous donner une base, et n'hésitez pas à poser des questions si vous en avez. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are around the world. Very happy to be here again with you tonight in order to talk a little bit about this question of psychological problem and spiritual attachment, which is quite important and with a huge contribution brought by the Spiritist teachings that we will try to transmit a little bit of this knowledge to you. Thank you for being with us.
Okay, thank you. So it's a lot of friends here. It's so nice to have all these friends from Uruguay, Saying here, good afternoon, brothers. Greetings from Uruguay to continue spreading what is the most beautiful thing, to share the Spiritist teachings that help us so much. Our friends from Sweden, we have here Leah. We also have here our friend Elsa Lee. Brazil, our dear friend Marisa. Nice to have you here with us, Marisa. From Germany, Maria Eugenio, good to have you here. From Canada, Leopold, good to have you here, my friends. And many, many others here.
Rihanna, South Africa.
Which one?
Rihanna.
Yeah, Rihanna, South Africa. So that's wonderful, Rihanna. Good to have you here today. Also, we have Fresh and Ney Silva. Okay, so as usual, let's start with.
Sorry.
Yeah,
we have Wanda. She is the first one.
Wanda, what is here? Yeah, Wanda here. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I think I say everybody here. Okay, let's start always with a short video, and this will open up our discussion today, which is a very good topic. And if you have any questions, please write down the comment box, and we will answer your question along to our presentation. Okay, thank you. Let's go. Let me put it here. Okay, and here we go.
Hearing voices is a very common human experience, and sometimes it can happen during a period of time, or some people more regularity. What you need to think about when hearing voices, is what are the voices saying to you? Is this disturbing you? Is this affecting your daily life? Is this affecting your mental health? So if it's affecting your mental health, you need to be thinking, do I need to see a doctor? And see what's going on. Some people who have what we call mediumship, that means the ability to hear the spirits from the other side, they can hear the spirits. So what spirits do we hear? The spirits that are linked to us, that are familiar to us, that are on the same wavelength as us. So if you're hearing spirits giving you not so good suggestions, then you need to think about how are you going to improve your own thought process so that doesn't mean anything to you. So for example, if they're suggesting, let's go and have a drink, or let's have more drinks, this kind of thing, but you're a person who doesn't drink, you're probably not going to be tempted. But if you're still struggling and thinking that you would like to have a drink, then that'll be harder for you. So it's about thinking about, it's like any friend. Whatever a friend says to you, you can follow what they say or not. You have always 100% control over your own decisions. It is when they say things that have, like, say, mirror what you might be interested in, that you find temptation or difficulty. Spirits can come through and give us intuition messages. So some people can hear it as a loud voice, or some people can hear it as a voice in their head, but saying, what is this voice telling me? And if this was my friend from next door saying this, would I listen or would I not? So it's just having that difference about not thinking, oh, this is something that's coming from the spiritual world, I need to follow this. No, this is a suggestion. Is it good? Is it bad? You make up your mind if you follow it or not. If you think, like even in the Bible, Paul says, we are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. So the spiritual world is, because we're thinking of our world here, and if we don't see things, we think they don't exist. But just imagine all the waves of all the cell phones, of all the TVs and everything that's going around everywhere, with communication going on at the moment that we are not tuning into. These things, they are around us all the time. So we might tune in and we might not. So we need to take control about what we're listening to. So change the channel if we're not liking what it is. So we can make an effort to change what channel we're listening into.
Okay, so let's start our ride today here. And as introduction here, I just want to give you a little bit, a simple definition from mediumship. According to Leon Denis in the book Spirits and Mediums, in a simple way, Leon Denis says, is the faculties that allow a human being communicate with the invisible world. Kardec, in the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 28, item 9, he says that mediumship are the mediums, are the interpreter interpreter responsible to transmitting to man the teachings of spirits to the material world. Okay? Saying that, that's a brief introduction. What is medium and mediumship? During my research here, I find out one of the most beautiful definitions of mediumship, and it was given by our dear friend Leon Denis in the book called Into the Unseen. And that is nobody better than help us than Charles to comment what Leon Denis says to us, what his comments about mediumship. Charles, my friend, can you help us here?
Sure, let's try. Thank you, Stevan, for the question. Really, Leon Denis, so he, as I told in some teachings, in some speech, recently, he met personally Kardec in 1867 when Kardec traveled to Tours, and he met him also 2 times before Kardec died in 1869. So Leon Denis was very young, and he was touched by the Spirit's book and by the other books of Allan Kardec, and turned into a Spiritist from a quite young period. He also started participating to mediumistic groups also very early in those 1860s or maybe early 1870s. The group of La Rue du Cygne, so-called in Tours. And there he wrote, I learned how the things can go wrong when we are doing them in an uncontrolled and unprepared way. And this led him to be more cautious in the experiments, in mediumship in particular. So he founded then later on in the 1880s another group which he was leading with several mediums coming and meeting regularly. So he wrote this book Into the Unseen after, the last revision of this book was compiling 40 years of mediumistic experiences by Leon Denis. And also all the studies he did around the mediumistic phenomenon, both from Spiritist movement and also from spiritualist or metapsychical or other psychical researchers around the world. So this book is really compiling the basis, which is coming from Medium's book from Allan Kardec, of course, but he also introduced all his personal experiences, confirming and going more in depth in some aspects, and also making the link with all the experiments that were developed in the meantime. So the book is basically divided in 3 parts, sorry. The first part is called the experimental spiritism. What are the laws? So we talked about it already a little bit in the previous lives. First, we have a soul. Second, this soul is surviving after we die. It is also pre-existing before we reincarnate. And the discarnated souls, they can communicate with the incarnated ones through persons with special faculty, which are called so-called mediums. So this we explained you already. And Leon Denis is really, how to say it, going in depth in this study. So the spiritist science, the progress of the studies, what are the spirits, how can we recognize them, what are the mediumships, the different cases, and so on. He is also having a section about education and the role of the mediums. And there, thank you, Stevan, for giving the hint of the quote, a cherry that we get out of the book in order to present you today, which is Leon Denis writing, mediumship is like a delicate flower that, in order to blossom, needs careful precautions and constant attention. It also requires method, patience, high aspirations, and noble sentiments. So you see, this is really summarizing also what our dear, what you have seen by Anna Sinclair in the video that we have shown at the beginning, really summarizing everything. So we do not gamble with something without knowledge, and mediumship is typically something that we need to study before practicing, before I don't even say gambling, but before practicing. So this is absolutely fundamental, because otherwise there is this big risk of spiritual attachment, which can jeopardize. So Leon Denis is then doing part 2 of the book, which is the experimental spiritualism, the facts. He's showing how to see all the studies made in UK, Italy, Europe, wherever in France, wherever around the world, showing all the different types of mediumship and so on. And then he's finishing with the part 3 of the book, which is the greatness and miseries of mediumship. And there is where he's developing more this question of spiritual attachment, which is a risk of the mediumship, which is practiced without adequate knowledge. And he's also touching the question of what can we do to help a person which is suffering from spiritual attachment or harassment of spirits, or whatever you call it, in order to free this person, because spiritual attachment, as you will see, is not only to mediums. It can happen to any person. Of course, the mediums are more sensible to harassment because they have a closer contact, let's say so, with the spirit somehow by being medium. But other person can also suffer this. So basically, it is really about, I think Anna Sinclair's video told it, you have to be always very, very careful to put this, what we call the Socratic filter, continuously. As soon as you receive something, or you get something, or you see something which came from the spirits, you have to check first, is it true? Second, is it good? And third, is it useful or opportune for the moment? And if one of the answer of one of the 3 questions is doubtful or is no, you better refrain and don't give continuity to this communication, because it can be exactly the beginning of a spiritual attachment. So this is, I would say, I don't want to talk too much today, because let's give you more space for the questions, as Stevan told. It would be just in a few words, really, the Into the Unseen from Leon Denis is, how to say, a kind of a medium's book from Allan Kardec, which was written and actualized 50 years later. So it is really a strong basis that can help the mediums and also the other persons to know exactly what it is about and to practice it safely, and also, as is writing, without any abuse, but at the opposite, practicing it for the good. What Leon Denis is telling, the glorious mediumship, which is a mediumship by seeking the help of the good spirits in order to make charity, in order to help, and as much as we can here on our earth, which needs so many help nowadays. So that's what I could say very shortly about this subject. And I give the word back to you, Stevan. Thank you.
Thank you, my friends. Thank you. I love that definition. I loved that definition from Leon Denis. Let's take care of our flowers, give them attention and patience and high aspirations. Based on that, my dear friend Sylvia, as Charles was explaining, and we saw from the video, we let's use pose or word to say we are surrounded by a cloud of
witnesses.
Witnesses, yes. My question to you is, some of these witnesses can become a kind of a spiritual attachment. Could you walk us through in order to say what is spiritual attachment? And the question is, when I have a psychological problem, is this linked or connected with a spiritual attachment?
Okay, that is a simple question with a very complex answer. I think very briefly. Just to begin, I think it's important to place something that's in the Spirit's book in order that I think people will understand better. In the Spirit's book, in question 159, Kardec asks the spirits, and the spirits explain to us that we are all mediums. All of us have mediumship in different levels, but we all do. So when we talk about spiritual attachment and all that, it's easier to understand how it is, because really we are all mediums, although we give the term medium to someone who has an ostensive mediumship that is very open, but every single person in the planet is a human being, is a medium. I think this is important to understand why we have this spiritual attachment and everything. I think an attachment, sorry, I will read my notes. An attachment is a persistent influence that a spirit will exert over the other. And we are all the time, as you quoted, from Paul as well, Anna and you, there are spirits all around us. Emmanuel tells us that it's about 20 billion spirits around our planet, and there's only 7 billion here. So you can imagine, when Paul says the cloud, you can imagine how many there are around. This for the earth only. So Kardec, he divided this in the medium's book, the different kind of mediumship, the influences that we can have. And he says we have a simple obsession. It's not an attachment per se, but the influences that we have from the spirit. We can have simple fascination and obsession and if possession. But the simple one is more or less what Anna was saying. We can hear voices. It's in a very subtle ways. It's a mental fixation. It's a fixed idea that it stays with us all the time. And usually it's a negative idea. And it makes us feel uncomfortable, tells us to do things we don't like to do, like in the example she gave about drinking, or it can be something against ourselves, against others, or against some situations, can cause fear, and we cannot get rid of that. But one thing that's important, if we feel like that, we can do something about it. Like Anna said, if it bothers us, we need to do something, and we can. The first thing is to say, is this my thought? Because is intruding and I don't like it, so it cannot be mine. Maybe I'm being influenced. So you can do something about changing your thoughts. You can listen to music. You can read something that is deep and important, something spiritual. You can pray. You can change the way you live as well. Not to watch certain kinds of films, not to go to certain places. You can change a little bit of your life, and you can ask for help as well. But mostly, the most important thing is prayer. If you do that, you can do meditation. You can maybe go for a walk, something, do some exercise. It will help you. You can more or less control that. The second one, as the spirits teach us, and as in the medium's book, is fascination. This one, it's rather difficult, this one, to deal with, because first of all, there is an influence, quite a heavy influence on us. And also, one of the things is that the spirit is influencing the medium or the person, and the person is almost in partnership with the spirit. They accept it because the spirit to manipulate them, inflate it. Their pride makes them feel really important. And that is one of the most difficult things, because when you are in partnership with something that's influencing you, it's very, very difficult. Of all the influence that we have, this is the most difficult to deal with, because, the person, as I said, is together, they're working together. And what causes is that the spirit will manipulate them. They'll say things, they'll do things, they become ridiculous, quite absurd sometimes, but they still think they're doing something really well. And this is quite difficult to deal with that. And then we have the obsession, which is a more harder kind of influence. It's almost a total control. The person will lose his will and definitely lose his free will as well. The person is completely controlled by the spirits that are influencing them. So in that sense, it's very, very difficult. And the person will do things that will hurt themselves or torture themselves. They can throw themselves in fires, all sorts of crazy things, really, really torture. And but this, can be helped. But in this case, mediumship work needs to be done as well, and also physical work, because this kind of influence will damage the physical body, because the influence is so strong that the person will become ill. All sorts of, the body almost stops working. And it's the same, the thing in possession, which is a sort of a level above this one, in which the spirit of the person almost moves away for the spirit that influencing them, taking over their bodies. And in this is also very, very difficult. No will at all. And in this case as well, mediumship work needs to be done, because we need to help the spirit that is doing it. I think one thing that we need to remember is that mostly in these cases, we are all influenced by spirit all the time. But when you come to the level of possession, obsession, it's usually something from the past. It's someone that we create problems with, we had unfinished business with. Most times, the person or we can have done something that really hurt and damaged that person. So I think, in order to work with this, we need to see that those people, they need our help rather than, saying, go away, we don't want you. And I think that's one of the big problems sometimes with exorcism, because you tell a spirit that's already hurt to move away. And in spiritism, we learn the opposite. We learn that this person is a person in need, and the only way to help the person who's suffering in that point is to help the spirit that's there. I think that's one of the most wonderful things in Spiritism. We learn to help everyone, that everyone is a person in need. And I think, we have some examples in the Bible. I mean, I think of two that Jesus were helping the people who were suffering from spiritual oppression, as the case of the boy that his father comes and say, he throws himself, he's hurting himself, and Jesus tells the spirit to leave him. And the other one as well, because obsession and possession can happen not only to an individual, but to a group, and sometimes to a collective place, collective a huge number of people, maybe even a small village or something. And I think if you remember the example of Loudun in France in the, I think, 17th century, in which all that community became obsessed. It happens as well. And when we go to remember what in the Gadarene that comes, when he sees Jesus, he comes and says, "Who you? What I have to do with you?" And then Jesus said, "What's your name?" And he says, "I'm Legion," because that person had so many spirits around him and talking through him and controlling him that he was a legion. If you remember that, it's one of the very famous passage of the Bible. But of course, Jesus had the authority, to talk to them and tell them to go. So I think now about spiritual attachment, not everyone has psychological problems. It's to do with spirit attachment. But it is in 7% of the cases, it is a spiritual attachment relating to this. But sometimes it's, the person was born with a problem in the brain and they need help. Or other times as well, it's mediumship that's opening up. It's coming, it's flourishing, opening, and the person doesn't know what it is, and they keep having problems. And it's mediumship. It's not attachment per se. It's just the development that they can hear, they can feel, all sorts of things. A lot of the situations, even though it can be a physical situation, a physical cause that causes the psychological problems, sometimes it's connected to the past, to something that, the law of cause and effect never fails. So even though it's not a spirit there, but the cause of the damage in a physical body, in a brain especially, is to do with something from the past. So I think in all the situations, in many cases, we can help ourselves through a change of life, to prayer, to meditation. We can ask for help, from professional people, and also if it's available to work with a mediumship group that we work with the spirit that is coming to us, and and prayer. And I think prayer for the person who's there influencing us in a negative way, and for ourselves. And help can be searched for and be received. There is always a solution. There is always a way of, sometimes, a person will suffer from terrible influence that will really damage their lives, but that is be the catalyst for them to change their lives in such a way that it becomes much richer and they will learn a lot more. So there is always a reason for everything. And I think, faith in God, and change the way we think as well, try to correct the manner. This thought is not mine. I don't want it. Do something else, say prayer, I had a lot of this, especially when I was developing my mediumship. I had terrible problem with this. I felt sometimes that my head was going to explode because so many people are talking at the same time, inside of my head. And what I used to do, I used to pray, not pray, just say the Lord's Prayer, because I thought it was the best thing to do. And I kept repeating it fast, until a time that I was listening to the Lord's Prayer in my head more than the voices, and it could clear, and I could, do something, it could come back to normal. And I mean, that's part of my own experience. But, we all have. So that is help for everyone, especially if we wanted to do something about. It's just like, I was saying, fascination. One of the biggest problem on that is when the person is under fascination, they are so connected to the spirit and they are manipulative. They will remove them from the places and from the people that can help them. They will isolate them. That's why it's so difficult to treat. But everything else, and even that can be treated. You can send prayers, and we can do a lot for them. So prayer, meditation, and work in goodness as well. Helping others is a good way to come out of depression, to come out of, if we care for others, there is always someone in worse condition than ourselves. And it's a great healing tool for us. So I think I end here. I think I spoke more than 5 minutes, but if anybody wants to ask a question, I'll be quite happy to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you. Let's travel now to Lithuania. Dr. Nadja. So, Labas. Question for you, my dear. Silva said not all psychological problems is connected with a spiritual attachment. Okay? On your research, have you seen any recognition of the presence of a spiritual attachment? Is there any kind of treatment that doctors are using to help all these people with psychological problems?
Yeah, as Silvia said, and during the video as well, it's a very subtle difference between the spiritual attachment and pathological psychotic event, for example, or as we can say that mediumistic abilities or mediumistic trance, they have similar psychotic experiences. I will give a little bit of a background of definition, so the audience can understand a little bit. So psychosis, for example, it's a condition that affects the way your brain processes information. So you might hear voices, see things, or even believe in things that they are not real. The person usually doesn't look after himself or herself. There's a lack of clarity in thinking, and it's more like a symptom. It can be triggered or caused by alcohol or drug abuse, extreme stress, violence, or some sexual abuse, or even child abuse. Injuries, traumas, psychological traumas, as sexual abuse, or even the death of a loved one, sometimes brain injuries, and this all tumor in the brain tumors, they can also trigger this psychotic event or experience. And schizophrenia in bipolar disorders, they are mental illnesses. So schizophrenia is the most known one. It affects 1% of the world population, and is a dysfunction of the dopaminergic neurons in certain parts of the brain. So it will be affecting the person's everyday life, the it's a burden for the person and for the family as well. So the person will react excessively and emotionally excessive, in an emotional excessive way. Different a little bit from the psychotic like event or experience that spiritual attachment presents. So the person hear voices, see spirits, but as Silvia mentioning the steps, no? There's some phases or classification, we can say, but most of the time the person is aware of this abnormality in his or her life, so she can differentiate what is normal and what is not normal for her. And in extreme cases, as Silvia was saying, so the spirit which is possessing the patient, the victim, as we say, it's referring himself, the person is referring himself or herself in the third person. So it's like Nadja. I am saying that Nadja is going for a drink because she wants for a drink. So it's usually like a third person, and not the person that is talking. What Dr. Alexander Moreira Almeida, a Brazilian psychiatrist, has mentioned before in many of his research studies, that a mental disturbance, in some cases, they can result from a spiritual attachment, and the spirit can influence negatively the patient or exacerbate negative feelings through a kind of telepathy. That's why, as Silvia mentioned, it's difficult to differentiate, but it's also the patient at the beginning, of course, can choose to accept or reject the obsessing influence. And as Anna in the video said as well, they have a group, a research department for spirituality and health at the University of the Federal University of Juiz de Fora in Brazil, that created a way to differentiate the non-pathological to pathological experiences. So the non-pathological experience would be spiritual experience, would be the mediums, and the pathological ones would be the schizophrenic patients. So usually the mediums, the person who is having the spiritual attachment doesn't lack, there's a lack of suffering, so they don't suffer that much at the beginning, of course, because it's important to say that to recognize this the symptoms or the signs and look for help and for the right person. Lack of suffering, lack of social or functional impairment, compatibility with the patient's cultural background, because some events, psychotic-like events or mediumistic trances, they are usually in a ritual or cultural or religious setting. Absence of psychiatric comorbidity, so the patient or the person doesn't have any other comorbidity, so they are usually healthy subjects, so healthy persons, is a healthy person, so they present just the hearing or the seeing, the spirits and hearing voices, and they have control over the experience. So when they have this control, they can then experience personal growth. So they get involved in voluntary work, as Divaldo Franco, with his 90 years of experience in mediumship. So he created a huge charity that look after children in Brazil, and he has written over 200 books, and he's not 94 years old now, and he has been traveling around the world lecturing about spiritism, and is still very active. So he has all the xenoglossia, he can see the spirit, he can talk to the spirits as we are talking now, and still he has a very humble life and a very active life. And so when we have this situations of spiritual attachment or psychotic-like event, we need to assess also the family. We doctors, we need to assess the family and friends, the social cultural situation of the patient. Nowadays, we have functional MRI and single photon emission CT scans that show the difference between mediums and schizophrenic patients. So the blood flow is different, the anatomy is different. So the mediums, they usually have normal anatomy. And these are very important investigations, exams, imaging studies that helps to differentiate the non-pathological to the pathological spiritual experience. And as we have already mentioned, but now we in the Royal College of Psychiatry in the UK, they have a paranormal research club. So in this paranormal research club, they do lectures about spirituality and mental health. They train young psychiatrists in how to take the spiritual history and how to identify the psychological problems. And Spiritism has ways to analyze all the settings of the person and align it with contemporary science. So it has the potential to bring about positive transformation in mental health care. So we have Dr. Alan Sanderson, a psychiatrist who does hypnosis for spiritual release. We have Dr. Emma Bragdon, who is an American psychotherapist, who has written a book in 2011 called Spiritism and Mental Health, where she describes this spiritual assistance department in a psychiatric hospital in Brazil. As Sylvia mentioned, that it has the healing through the spiritual release, hands-on healing, magnetized water, prayer, very important, the prayer, homeopathy, energy work. We have also the Haraldur Erlendsson, the son of Erlendur Haraldsson, both psychiatrists from Iceland, and Dr. Haraldur, the son, Erlendsson, I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. He's also specialized in hypnosis and past life regression therapy. So it's very important to seek for help for those patients who have a pathology, or disbalance in the neurotransmitters that lead them to depression. For example, they need to take medication to help to stabilize the levels of dopamine and serotonin, endorphins. For those who are suffering with schizophrenia, they need to have also medical attention, treatment, follow-up. And for those who have the spiritual attachment, they will take the medication if the doctor cannot identify it, but they won't get better. They will probably get worse, or they will be apathic, they will lack energy and will of life, and sometimes getting into depression. So there is very important for us doctors to take the spiritual history of the patient and see what impact this spiritual or religious life has in the patient's life, and then at the beginning already try to get the specific or the specialized help. For the spiritual attachment, we can always, as Sylvia mentioned, the prayer is very useful when we don't have too much contact, but the family members of the community, or even the friends that are very close to them, they can take them to a spiritual center or connect with a spiritual center via online. So we have all mediumship courses online. So via Skype, sometimes in small groups if you don't want to, or one-to-one even. So there is help. That's very important to get some help. Outdoors activity, meditation. I'm repeating Sylvia, but that's very, very important to look after your health and your mental health as well. Voluntary work, because then, as we mentioned in the previous video last week, voluntary work takes the focus from yourself, and you can see that the other person has also problems, and then you can try to help this person. Then you do good for you. Your vibration will change, and then this connection with the obsessor or this past life friend will be disconnected, so it won't have any influence. So I think just to summarize that we have help there. We have many now research coming out in mental disturbances, mental health issues, and mediumship, and they all can be tailored to the patient, the individualized treatment, and they can help and then guide the patient also to the specialist or to a spiritual center, to the community, and that can get some give some help to them. I was going to talk about a little bit more about Divaldo, but there is now in online also you can find a recent paper published by Dr. Alessandra Moreira Almeida, June now, this month, about the mediumistic life of Divaldo Franco, so 90 years of mediumship. It's very interesting. You can find it online.
Okay. Thank you, my dear. Thank you. We already have here three questions, but I will give. Let's see what's Elsa have to us today, and then we go to the questions. My dear friend, we saw science, we saw reason. Now it's time for our heart to speak. How to avoid spiritual attachments that lead us to illness.
It's a very good point. People never pay attention in these two situations, but the Spiritist teachings, the Spiritist science can help us and advise us, or make a suggestion for each one of us, being a Spiritist people or not a Spiritist people. It's useful for everyone, okay? How to act in order to be protected. I go straight to the point, because I have many topics here, straight to the point with the spirit, Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, that write many books through Divaldo Franco as a medium. In one of his books, in Torments of Obsession, he says, only the constant vigilance of the right consciousness constitutes a defense mechanism against these assortments of the lower spiritual world, alongside the involvement in intimate commitments to the simplicity of heart and action, as Nadja mentioned before, Sylvia mentioned before, persevering in duties without any extravagance until the moment of freedom of the physical body. That this book is a very important, interesting book that talks about torments of obsession. Is a very important topic that each one of us, we are under these trillions of witnesses, spiritual witnesses that are surrounding us. And depending of the law of action and attraction that we are, eye to eye, mind to mind, we can attract and be under their, of course, their wings, we can say like that. But if you focus your mind in a different way, that you see, this thought is not mine, well, I don't think about that. Be sure that the influences are coming and they are in need So never sworn against these spirits, but show the other face of the coin. We can say like that, né? Because the law of attraction works in both ways. It is a charity to help others, and we will receive help. Better if you can transform the sentiment of an enemy to a fraternal brotherhood. So the spirits that surrounding us, they have focus. Why? They are surrounding, especially pointing you at the aim is you, your life. And a lot of things happen in this field, actually, about obsession and spiritual attachment. But with higher and positive thoughts, with good deeds, with honest and correct attitudes, with higher feelings, with the practice of good and charity, we are in tune with the spirits of light or higher spirits, our mentor or our spiritual friends. So we are tuned to the light, and the darkness cannot come near us, but they are watching us. If you are a good person, help here and there, they will learn with us. They will come in our spiritual center. They are vigilant on us. So we can be an example of goodness, and we can turn the other face to a good face for them and help them, pray for them so they can go to the light, they can live as in freedom, they can go to the spiritual world, they can follow the benefactors, so they will be helped in spiritual world, in spiritual colonies, as we saw in the book Not Solar. If I do not seek to elevate my thoughts, I do not seek to improve myself morally, I do not seek to practice good and charity, I am vulnerable to receiving negative spiritual influences. So I will stop here now. Our time is near flowing. And thank you, Stevan. But we have to be vigilant around us and change our thoughts for a better moments. That is the freedom and defense. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear. Okay, we are very close to our ending time here. Let me go through the question here. Sylvia, that is a question for you, my dear.
Yeah.
Leopold here asks, question for Sylvia. How does a mentally ill person and or a therapist know if there is spiritist attachment?
That's an interesting question. Sometimes the person does not know that they are being influenced at all. And I think this is mostly the great majority of people, because we are very privileged that we know these things about, through spiritism, but most people don't even believe in spirits. And most therapists don't either. So I think in some situations, it would be very difficult a treatment, because I think, like Nadja mentioned, they will give them medicine, they will give them therapy, but unless the spirit is not dealt with, they will not go away. So the influence will be always there, and the person will tend to deteriorate if they don't change the way they are. I just find that if someone has, at least, thank goodness now, there is a lot more doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists, professionals, health professionals that are beginning to see man as a whole, not just a body to be treated. But I think it's still very much the paradigm, although there is a change coming, which is, it's important. In this case, if the person does not know, I think they do have the spiritual help anyway, even if they don't believe, if they don't accept that there is, maybe the therapist to be guided to give a treatment that will help the person, because the spiritual benefactors, our guardian angels, are always there watching over us and helping us. Of course, for the people who do have an idea about a spiritual perspective. And, if we have a center or something, then it's, of course, their help will be much quicker for them. But I believe that everyone is helped, by the grace of God.
Thank you, my dear. Okay, so we have another question here. I think I would say here, those who feel more comfortable to answer. Mediumship in the third millennium. How to identify and help young people with new types of mediumship not identified by Kardec?
Can I answer this?
Sure.
May I answer this? There is no such a thing as Kardec not identifying anything. There is nothing new that has not been identified in the books of Spiritism. In the first five, all the books of Kardec, everything that is there are things in the Spirit's book and the Medium's book that we haven't even talked about yet. So there is nothing in the new millennium that's not already there that has spoken for by the spirits and Kardec. So if you go to the basic books and reading it, then everything. I think a point, even in the science, in the most modern science now, we have things in the Spirit's book about the fluids, the primitive fluids, that science only now are beginning to attach to the idea that is already in the Spirit's book 170 years ago. About dark energy, and he talks about the fluids, the primitive secondary. Only now science is thinking about it. So there is nothing new. Everything about spirituality is in the Spirit's book and in the Medium's book and in the books of the codification. Kardec was a very thorough man, and the spirits that work with him were the best.
Maybe the person can write here in the comments which kind of mediumship he is talking about, because I agree with Sylvia 100%. And then he say here, Christiana Prada is saying the same. There is no such a thing. So it's important to know. Perhaps there are things that is new, but I don't think so.
I'm sorry, Elsa, but I don't think there is anything new. There are like 50 pages in the Spirit's book that give every single type of mediumship there is. You can't have a new one starting out now. Maybe the way people are dealing with it is different. And I think, a lot of people watch those American movies that they are doing a lot of spiritual things, and they have different ways of dealing with it because they don't know any better.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry to be like this, but I am very proud of, the books that we have, because I think we haven't even begun to understand what we have in our hands in question of knowledge about the spiritual world and spirituality and what kind of beings we are. Because, I know that a lot of people talk about inferior spirits, but to me, I feel that I'm not an inferior spirit. I am a spirit that are going towards the light. That's how I see not only me, but every spirit. Because, in the Spirit's book, they say, will everyone be enlightened? And the answer from the Spirit is, it's your destiny. So it doesn't matter how long we'll take, but we are spirits of light, and we are in the path. So if we are a little bit behind, we can, eventually move on. So I feel very strongly about this thing. Sorry.
Exactly.
So, Charles knows a lot about Kardec as a French student.
Yes, I basically agree with your statements. We may say, for instance, that the instrumental transcommunication was not existing at the time of Kardec, of course, but it is nothing much more than a variety of the material effect mediumship, but applied to electronics, which of course did not exist at the time of Kardec. So it's a kind of a variant or a new application of some type of mediumship. But I'm also not aware about really something completely new coming from new generations or whatever. So if the person who made the question could give us some more, Guilherme, could give us some more hints, we can investigate and then come with a more detailed answer.
Yeah, because also just one point. I mean, for us, if anyone has read the Andrea Luiz books, throughout the book, especially the mechanisms of mediumship, they have all this kind of instruments already in the spiritual world. So all these new instruments are becoming a reality here already existed in the spiritual world. A long time. They've already been using it there. So I think even in this point, the spirits are already more advanced.
Yeah,
Okay,
just to mention the André Luiz, I'm sorry, the André Luiz wrote the books in 1950, so the things that we are now
the first one, 1943, yeah.
Yes, so yeah, I think just to summarize my talk, I think we have to send love to everybody, send love to even to this spiritual attachment to the spirits that are around us, because this is the way that we are going to move and progress to a new life, to a better life. So if we send love, if we can love everybody around us, and even these ones that are asking for help only, so as we are asking for help all the time, so they are also in different ways, but then I think love is the answer for everything. So thank you very much, everybody. I know we passed the time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, stay there, because the last question is for you, my dear.
It's for you.
No mediumship or obsessive processes can be treated with medicines.
Yeah, I think we have already talked about it a little bit, because we need to identify if there is a pathological problem, so disbalance of neurotransmitters or a lack of dopamine, for example, or this firing of this dopamine, the connections of the neurons. If they have a background or like a subtle disbalance, then the patient will need medication. But the medication, in case of healthy patients, they won't work. So because you're healthy, you're just taking the medication, you're making then the person worse. So if there is no need for medication, so if everything is normal, the CT scans are normal, the blood tests are normal, the patient is feeling well, and there's no need for medication. But if there is a component of neurotransmitters, hormone disbalance, then yes, of course, the patient will need to have medication.
Okay, thank you. So let me put the announcements here because we are 10 minutes past. But I want to say Cristina Prada wrote a lot of a very good example here. And I do believe, Cristina, when you change yourself, when you, especially when you do charity and you donate yourself, you forget a little bit, even for a while, about yourself, and you start to look after your neighbor. Doesn't matter if this neighbor is someone on the street, if your neighbor is your friend, but when you start to help them, you will become a better person, and we start to give attention what is required. So thank you for your examples here. Unfortunately, I cannot put this in our comment here, but thank you very much for all your inputs here, Cristiana. Thank you very much. So let's go to announcements very quickly here. And Buzz has released the newsletter number 74, is available on internet. So there you can see a little bit comments about the 8th British Congress on Medicine and Spirituality. Elsa, if you want to give some color here.
Yes, each 3 months we release a newsletter. So this newsletter now is so important because I'm talking about spiritism in Japanese, in the internet. I'm talking about a new book that we will launch in 3rd of July. That is the Spirits book in Hebrew. I'm talking about the 8th British Congress of Medicine and Spirituality. It's really good points to learn and see around the world what is happening in English, of course. Okay, but you can see the in www.bas.org.uk. If you can type it there, because I couldn't do here, Stevan.
Okay.
www.
Yeah, it's already here on our comment box. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go to the next one. So don't miss, on the 3rd of July, we will have our talk about Leon Denis. That's a project between Buzz and the Spiritist Society of Ireland and Kardec Group and Kardec Radio. So we join the efforts. Our dear friend Dana Sisi will talk about the book The Big Enigma from Leon Denis. So don't miss it. Set your clock. It's 3rd of July, 4 p.m. London time. Okay, and our next topic for next Wednesday is controlling our emotions by acknowledging spirituality. And we will have a special guest, Fernanda Perini. She's from UK. She's a psychologist from UK, and she gonna give us some clarity about this topic. Okay, so that's it from us today. Say thank you very much. A special thank you, Nadja. Special thank you, my dear Elsa. France, my dear Charles, my dear friend Charles. Sylvia, it's our pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank
And
you.
all comments we have here, thank you. Forgive me if I forget to say your name or your comments here, but I can see a lot of comments, especially for our dear friend Leah. So thank you. I wish you a best of rest of day for you. And
Okay.
I'll see you next Wednesday.
So I would like to say thank you to Cristiana Prada. Is a daughter of my dear sister by heart, Dr. Irvenia Prada.
Okay.
I love so much Irvenia. She stayed in my home here in London years ago.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, my dear
Say hello
friends.
to my Okay, good night, good morning, good afternoon. God bless, and I'll see everyone on next
Thank
week.
23rd. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, then. Bye.
Au revoir.
Thank you, Cristiana.